you want a more?
Hi, I'm just starting the day here at Macc, where we're going to start our event, where we're looking at income generation, we're looking at funding, bid writing, you name it. There's a packed agenda we'll let you know more about in a moment. My name's Michaela, for anyone who's not in before. We've got some new faces, we've got some faces that we've not seen for ages, and everyone else in between. So thank you for making the time today. We are a bit cosy, and we might get a little bit cozier yet, but hopefully all will go well. I run an organisation called Flourish Together. We a pay-it-forward consultancy that supports all kinds of social enterprises, charities, people with great ideas for social change, and we help them frame and shape and progress with what it is they want to do. We reinvest our profits in supporting women as a force for social change. So some of you will know us for a lot of our women's development programmes. But we've decided to come out of our women's development bubble post-COVID. We've always worked with all sorts of organisations, but really pushing forward to help more people generally across Manchester, Stockport, Wigan, Tameside, several boroughs to be fair. And in the last year or two, we've been working behind the scenes on a number of sort of strategic networks that I'm thinking to look at how can we fill some gaps. Because we know there's huge talent in Manchester, there's amazing charities, social enterprises and change makers working at all sorts of levels, but support's not necessarily being that consistent across the board, whether you're looking at infrastructure agencies, the growth hub with the business support, finding the right place to go for support. So Tom will introduce himself in a minute, working at Macc here. He and I and a number of people have been looking at developing, just moving, even though it's like back to front, Manchester Social Economy Alliance. So Flourish is one of the sort of founding partners of this, as are Macc, as are a number of other brilliant social enterprise support people. Some are consultants, some have just worked in the sector for a very long time, some run charities and social enterprises, and we've been piloting a series of events since February. So kind of February, March, April. We're just starting to wrap up a pilot phase, believe it or not, where we've tested a few types of sessions, and we're going to then invite people back in June to a bit of a review, evaluation, see what people want next. We've been asking people things like that all along, and Tom will let you know. We've got these feedback forms that helps you give us a bit of feedback, tell us what else you need. The council, we are working closely with, we've worked closely with for years, are finally, I should say it out loud, but finally, and they want to, but you've got to have a united front if you go into the council. And so we've got a united front in terms of what we do with Flourish, we've got a united front in terms of what Macc does, but we now want a united joint approach for the Social Economy Alliance to let them know what we need backing. They'll support what they can support, and us as a collective are pretty industrious enterprising organisations anyway. We'll look at how else we resource the rest. That's the theory. So just thought I'd give you a tiny bit of background. Tom will give you a little bit more, but yeah, we're really looking forward to today, and I think Tom's going to talk about the agenda. What's on it, so I'll get out of the way.
Yeah, so but yeah, as Michaela said, I'm from an organisation called Macc. That's the building you're in now. We would be in a bigger room, but the roof did come down in that room, which is now repaired, but it's been all sorted. So we had to be in this room, but if it does get too hot, we can cut that door open. But it's very cosy, I'm aware. But yeah, Macc is the organisation that supports the voluntary community social enterprise sector in Manchester. You might know it's the charity or the third sector, but in theory, we support all the organisations that make up that, from your tiny voluntary sector organisations to massive national, international charities, as long as they're in Manchester, or help people in Manchester. That's our aim. But that SE bit, the social enterprise bit, we weren't really doing enough in that space. So we met people like Michaela and lots of other people in the space to ask, what's missing in Manchester, basically. And we heard there's a lot missing. There's people trying to do as much as they can with the resources they've got. So it was like, what can we do? And with all these things, the best thing to do is to kind of come together as friends and allies and people who want to do good. And that's what the Alliance is. So the Alliance is basically, as we said, if you want to set up an organisation in this kind of social enterprise world, community business world, or you already have one, it's like, we'll get your support, basically. We'll bring you together. We'll strengthen, us as a collective. So that's what we're calling an alliance. It's people coming together to do as much as they can with what they've got. Before I forget, just for today, housekeeping. So we're the safest people in the building because the place we go for a fire is out this door. So we're just literally out there. If there's a fire alarm, there isn't one planned. Toilets are there. Just literally there's two there. You've seen the tea and coffee, and if you haven't already signed in, do sign in. And then the last thing, I will start taking pictures, so feel free to grab me like privately and say I don't want to be in any pictures and not happily. make sure nothing gets shared.
Phones at the ready. We don't take loads, but we take a few, and they tend to either there as evidence or we tweet it for you to sort of help people see what's going on and maybe entice more people to participate.
Yeah. And they've been sold out. I mean, we know that there has been need for these because the events have been sold out because they were a packed room. So we know these
sold
events...
out and gate crashes, but
and gate crashes. Got enough chairs. Exactly. But yeah, this is a pilot project. So we're running this. And the thing I will keep saying is do us a feedback form because we want to know what could work better, what you'd like to see in future, and we'll do our best to make it happen. I think that's it explained. Grab me if you have any questions. Just for today's agenda. So there's arrival and coffee, which we've all done very successfully. We're doing our intros now. And then, yeah, first up, we've got Michaela doing our shaking up your income generation cocktail. I think that's a nice, whets your appetite for what it will be. I won't say any more. And then next up, we've got my colleague Rory, who's coming downstairs from Macc to talk about kind of what the current funding landscape is. I think that explains itself in the title, but it's just like how to apply for funding, what is out there, what Macc can help with as well in terms of free support. And then we've got a bit of a panel discussion. Again, speaks for itself, how not to write a funding bid. Got lunch provided by a social enterprise caterer at Open Kitchen Manchester, and I've doubled the order from last time. Anyone that was here last time, it was like rations. So
first one we got loads, second one was a bit.
Yeah, so it's like the Goldilocks. Yeah, we'll get it right then. So we've got lunch, and then we've got a mini masterclass there, considering your financial plans and your budget. Yeah, I'll let Gurj say hello and yourself as well. Say hello in a second. Bit of a break, and then I will get a form downstairs in a second. It's just printing where you can book in to kind of have one-to-ones and just to talk through, where you're at with funding, what we can help with, and again, we'll help as best we can. But
if you want to leave at 2:30, or you've got to leave at any time, you're not captive. Some people have got to go for appointments and this and that. And yeah, if you're welcome to leave then, or network, or as it says, book in for a sort of 15-20 minute one-to-one where we just start to have a chat around whatever's pertinent now. Clearly the topic's funding and budgets, and there's Gurj here that will be part of those conversations. There's a chap called Adam who's here as well, got a finance background, who's going to get involved with those. I can talk about pretty much anything that might crop up. Likewise with Tom, connected to lots of networks, so it doesn't have to be a finance chat or challenge, it can be whatever's going on. Yeah, great. And Gurj and Adam, I don't know if you just want to say hello, why you're here.
So I think I've seen some of you before in the previous sessions, some of you may be new, so welcome, and I'm really glad that everybody's here. I'm Gurj Kang, and I run for the finance, and it's effectively consultancy for support to social enterprise, SMEs. My background is I'm a management accountant, qualified management accountant, and a finance business partner. So I've spent years and years working with the corporate sector. So I've worked for the likes of Morrison's and Aramark and WSP and organisations like that. And then I moved to charity and third sector. So in terms of understanding the process that's required, but really it's about understanding the interaction that's required with finance. A lot of things we've done a lot of sessions with Michaela and Flourish and Unlimited and Macc as well previously, in regards to putting confidence into understanding finance, because it's a really integral and important part of what everybody's plans are. Everybody in the room is here committed to fantastic causes, doing amazing things, and you're running programs and you're doing things which actually, if you think about it, the local authority and the private sector isn't really willing to support, or they don't feel that there's a need for. So you're plugging a massive gap, and it's really important that work continues. A lot of that work originates from a really strong point of passion and enthusiasm, and I'm really drawn to that. So I find out all of you really admirable and amazing people because you have that energy. And I'm really here to say, well, because of my experience, and I'm jaded in it, and we're in it, and going, I've seen it happen, seen it work, seen it not work, and it's just about sharing the best practice. To go, what do you need? Yeah, it's a practical piece about approaching things methodically, because people are really scared of finance. And when we do the session later, we'll interact a bit more. We can chat over lunch as well. But the key thing is everybody seems to be really scared of it, and they go, right, it's something I don't understand, I don't get it. We all have things that we fear. I'm not a rocket scientist by any means, so if I can do it, anyone can do it. It really is about getting the approach right. And what we'll do in the masterclass that we're doing at 1:30 is really looking at taking the fear out of it and making you more confident about approaching it, making you realise how easy it is, and making you realise how it's something that you can all put together. Everyone's at varying levels. And then the support beyond that is also in cash flows, budgets, annual work that you might be doing, sometimes in 3 to 5 year budgets as well that are supported. So it
ties into a lot of the bids that different people go for. They have to have different types of budgets in it.
Exactly, and it feeds back into that landscape of the funding landscape, principally because the financial statements that you do share with funders is an indication of where you are and where you're intending to be. You know, it's something that they can read without having to speak to you to get a map of what your ambition is and also where any potential pitfalls or problems might be signposted. And the other thing about it is that's why it's not, people tend to access finance at a given point in time. And what we're saying is it's something that has to be the constant line from when you start thinking about whatever your venture is. Because
We'll get more of Gurj a little bit later.
Yeah.
Adam, we're putting you on the spot here because you come to your first event, but we met you recently at one of George Constanza's events. So under the Social Enterprise Alliance, there's Flourish, there's Macc. There's also something called Manchester Social Entrepreneurs Network, run by a chap called George Constanza, and we're all kind of sing from the same sheet sort of thing. And we spotted Adam and his amazing skills. So I don't know if you just want to say a little bit about yourself.
Right. So, well, I would say that I recently escaped the corporate world, gone self-employed, so working with small, medium enterprises. So similar background to yourself here. So the finance business partner at the time, worked for the likes of Entertainment, Matalan, recently worked with Network Plus. So a variety of sectors. Obviously, never worked in this sector, so that's why I'm here today. And hopefully, I can use some of the skills that I've taken from private sectors and apply them here and learn. And
I think I'm always on the scout for good finance bods and Morag's here as well, actually from Northwest London. I mean, if you want to set up one-to-one corner as well, you can do later, Morag.
Oh, okay.
Morag's been through one of our Flourish programs, great accountant, works with the VCSE sector as well, and we're always on the lookout for people who A, get this sector, and B, get the complexities and the nuances of it. And there's absolutely no harm at all in people from corporate and more private world come into this space, just help build confidence and build strength in the way plans get put together. And at Flourish, we do a lot of bid writing and 3 to 5 year kind of performance work, but we're busy and we recognise we can't do it all. So we're like scooping up who do we know that we can sign those people to. Ash, she's not king. So cool. I think unfortunately we haven't got the time to go around and do intros from everybody in the room, which we sometimes do at other events, just because we've got so many people here. But you'll be able to network, you'll be able to chat to one another, and we'll no doubt find out a little bit more about people anyway through the course of the session, just because of we're going to be chatting to you. We're going to be asking you what you think and what you're up to. So
it's time, for the. I was just going to say the first thing and massive. But massive thanks to Gurj and yourself, Adam, for coming and for putting your time in. And thanks for everyone for coming as well. I don't think I said that at the start, but it's really nice to see a full room. We are to time as well. So
we are
over
it. So
ready? Yeah, we'll work.
And I was just going to say on your we'll sort a sign-in sheet for Morag at lunchtime. So if I wasn't sure how long you'd be able to stay, but we'll chat about that later. Even better.
Yeah.
That's an assistant.
So
I found this section a lot. So looking forward to running it again.
Do we want the door open? Is everyone okay? I'm pretty warm.
It's a bit breezy, but you can certainly try if you want to open the door a little bit. Entirely up to you. So this session can be, an hour. It can be a whole day. It can be months. We've got 30 minutes. I'm basically doing a little bit of a taster on this stuff, and then we're kind of tag teaming with Rory from Macc. They're going to come down and talk a little bit more about the funding landscape and the funding world. So I'm going to make a start, and apologies for anyone on catch-up who's looking at this. Okay, good.
No, that's fine. You should get more.
I'm not going to rattle through all my experience in this, but I've got a good 20 years plus, and all sorts, from small bids, large bids, crowdfunding, managing large funds. At Flourish Together, we have a small seed fund. Cash and getting the resources, not just cash, but resources are a massive part of anybody's journey in trying to develop what it is they're doing. And so we're glad. Oh, we're doing it again. You've got the food.
I know, yeah.
There we go. So I'm just keeping this very, very simple and getting us ready for the weekend. About cocktails, really. But I think we've got another one for everybody. One for each. I'm just going to stick them on the tables, and we'll see. It's a handout. Use it or don't use it. Kind of Google sheet. See how you go. I've got more if we need more. If anybody's not got one of one, there's a few more about. So I'm just going to walk us through these things, and then we'll have a think, or you can have a think, doodling. What is it you're doing in each of these spaces? Whenever you're running, whether it's even trialing a project, or you've got visions to grow it for the future, or you've been running for some time. Having a mixed income generation cocktail, we never just talk about funding. We never help people to become grant reliant because it's not sustainable. It won't work, and you'll come a cropper. And there's far better ways of spending your time writing funding bids, frankly, and far more fun ways as well. And some of them sit within these boxes. So I'm going to sort of walk through what these things are. Some of them are very obvious. That's your kid.
When do you go?
I think you need a word.
Yeah. I won't do that. Trading, clearly. So we've got trading, commissioning, fundraising, funding, and social investment. We're just going to kind of whistle stop through, and you can be having a think about where are you doing the most in these boxes? Which of these boxes scare you? And which make no sense whatsoever. And hopefully between us we'll work this through. So trading, clearly, selling products and services in its simplest form. There's loads of social enterprises and charities out there doing this. Clearly, charities have a limit, about £80,000 or so, a limit on certain trading. They can only trade for primary purpose. Social enterprises can trade as much as they like in the main, as long as it's legal, and they're accounting and recording this stuff. I've given a smattering here just to remind people of the weird and wonderful ways that people earn money in social enterprises, because people sometimes forget, let alone the fact that people, sometimes money is a dirty word, or they've got these fears about charging or pricing things up. That's something to get to with Gurj later. People selling all sorts. So, cow herds set up in Salford. Initially, they had a cafe, a pop-up cafe. Don't know if anyone ever went to that. On the border of Salford and Manchester, that was outdoors. They did great, but it was stressful. They realised after 3 years they didn't want to run a cafe, didn't want to be stood outside in the cold in this pop-up thing day in day out. And the politics of trying to keep that pitch was hard. But what they did know they were doing was selling amazing juices. So they're all about nutrition, well-being, helping people that wouldn't normally get their fibre a day crammed into these fancy drinks bottles. And over time, instead of selling these things over the cafe, they partnered up and got smart, and they now sell these sort of wholesale to cafes, bars and restaurants. And that was just their journey of evolving. But smoothies and partnering juices, and partnering with different organisations, sports organisations, youth organisations. So they might be selling their fancy smoothies in wherever, Ridsford and Didsbury and Chorlton, but their profits or their spare surpluses go to kids clubs and holiday clubs, and we've had them at some of our events and different things. So just selling physical products like that is one. What physical products have you got, or what might you sell? And it's a business model in itself, but it's one not to leave off the table. This picture here, has anybody ever been to Hume Community Garden Centre? We've got some nods, and fab space and place, and that's evolved over time, hasn't it, for anyone that knows it? But they sell all sorts, don't they? They sell plants, they sell Christmas decorations, they sell fabulous cake and coffee from their cafe there, Cafe Sorrel, who we do a lot of work with. But they also are selling space, they're selling programmes, they're selling training. So in addition to trading, they're also doing quite a lot of commissioned projects and programmes. They're getting funny, they're doing all sorts, but they've got a really, don't get me wrong, there's plenty more to do. It's always a knife edge, but they've certainly got a good mixed cocktail, because they're doing a bit of everything. We've hired their space before now to run sessions, sports plenty of plants and Christmas trees in there. I won't go through all of this, because certainly cafes and food is one thing. Various apps are out there now. What apps, widgets, residual sales could you be getting from other online tools, apps, content? It's just there to sort of flag that up, that more and more organisations now are either developing that within their plans, or there are some great apps out there that are social enterprises. So this is Too Good to Go, and they basically take surplus. We've got this massive database, surplus food at the end of the day. All these partners are plugged into this system, and they're telling them we've got all this food left, and people can just go online, find whatever it is, a bunch of bananas, 3-course meal, sandwiches, you name it. Instead of it going to like Fair Share or food banks, this is an alternative method where people can just look at, you know, what's going free, or what's going spare, or what's like a tenth of the price, and you can go and make sure it doesn't go into landfill type stuff. I've got me on there and bit basically saying, you know, you can sell yourself, which is, you know, a lot of us like frequently do if we're like consultants or speakers or out there. Vic in particular, you know, I sell myself as a social business development consultant, and, you know, help people on a one-to-one through like a day rate or an hourly rate or whatever. Vic is similar, runs Mike Media, and again, she's selling training and she's selling editing services for editing podcasts. So it's just thinking who in your organisation is a sellable asset, I suppose, which sounds a bit, you know, nasty, but if you think about where are the assets in what you're doing, you know, and you know what you're doing, you know what you're doing now, but there might be other things. I remember working for Bolton's Steps, it's like a mental health charity, Bolton. They do all sorts of amazing commissioned and funded programs to support people with their mental health, but they also have a real passion for baking, and they make the best loaf cakes going, and they, you know, they're selling, you know, cakes in cafes, and I was buying shed loads of them for a social enterprise, not just for me. Anyone who knows me knows I eat a lot, but no, trying to get more cafes, social enterprise and otherwise, by having places like Bolton Steps in their supply chain, so that they've got an additional income stream that on first glance you wouldn't even know was happening. And granted, it might only be, you know, a few £100 a week, but it's, you know, it's whatever it is, as long as it's making a profit, it's worth doing. And then me again, their organisation based over on the Wirral. She was a hairdresser, so yeah, not all social enterprises are born out of well, they are born out of social need, but not everybody who comes into it is from a voluntary community background. They'll come from private sector or wherever. And yeah, she'd been a hairdresser for years and holistic therapist. And although she'd not got lived experience of cancer herself, she'd obviously got a lot of clients who had cancer, and they really needed to re-look at themselves, rethink, get support really emotionally, but also physically, to feel beautiful again, to feel like they were themselves and they'd not lost a sense of identity. So she's selling wigs, she's selling coffees, she's selling holistic therapy treatments. So it's just in addition to all these funds that we go after, all these tenders or, you know, procurement portals that people might be registered with, you know, what could you be selling, which is like the message. Has anybody got any quick examples of, you know, stuff that you know that you're trading and selling?
Not the station. We struggled with supporting people who had paid clients to take out and take them to shops and slightly older, and that's dipped. And so from that we started to get funding at the moment of a project that's called Going to the Day, looking at social life, 2 hours, 5 weeks.
And that's funding, but did you create a product through that?
Yes, we did, because it's now Those Are the Days product.
Exactly.
It's a thing, you know, it's not tangible. We just got a small contract with housing association to come in and do these Those Are the Days project.
Brilliant.
5 weeks or 2 hours, and people chat about the past.
And that's a really good example. People forget, you know, it's all well and good, go to the lottery, go to a housing station, go to wherever you're going to get that fund. But if it's a one-off project, you're off the cliff again. Whereas if it's a project that's creating some resources for the next thing, or it's a project that's creating a new sellable service or consultancy workshop or whatever it might be, you maximise what you brought in rather than, you know, waiting for the next thing. So we'll probably end up coming back to things like that later. And we're doing it. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, then. commissioning consideration. So commissioning is basically almost like wholesale trading. So rather than selling, customer, to customers or to businesses, it's boxing up what you want. Yeah, you can get back to this. It's selling en masse to a particular client who's got a set of objectives that they want you to deliver against. It's basically what it is. So you haven't got free reign particularly, but you will have a series of products and services that can meet commissioners' needs. And sometimes people think commissioners are these, and they are sometimes a bit hidden, highly, beings who are like enigmas, but we're all commissioners really. We forget that commissioners aren't just the NHS and the police and education services. Macc's a commissioner, Flourish is a commissioner. We're all commissioning things at different levels. Everybody's got a supply chain in a way that they need fulfilling. And so even if you're like, oh, not sure about this, or somebody's saying that you've got to, have all this admin capability, or you've got to have a turnover of so many million, or you've got to be insured for 5 million, or whatever some of the barriers are that people feel they might have to commissioning, you can nudge your way in, is my sense. And yeah, ultimately, in order to do it, you've got to think, well, who are commissioners of things? Who are commissioners of things that we do, or how could we align ourselves with people's needs and priorities? And so asking people who've got budgets, basically, whether it's big budgets, national budgets, local budgets, tiny weeny budgets, scratchy bits of underspend, whatever it is, we need to commission things. So, think about commissioning in its broadest sense. And you do have to do, just like with anything else, with, you've got to research things, build relationships, and think about how you can best meet need. Usually, there's some sort of set of outcomes that a commissioner wants to see happen. It might be health and wellbeing outcomes, or education outcomes, or it might be delivering against a specific contract, and you're a bit part in that. So it's just thinking, what can you add? How can you save somebody time, money, and stress? Or reach the best way to start when you're either early stage or in the VCC sector is, how can we take headaches away from these people who don't know what they're doing? How can we reach communities that they can't reach? And for being mindful of being careful of who you partner with and what their motives are and the relationships that you might build with them. And typically you'll want to have some sort of track record, we're certainly going for commissions or looking at, procurement options. Usually you've got to have some level of track record, depending on what you're going for. You've got to have a capacity to deliver at a certain level, or particularly as you're going for your own at a scale. And that can be, it can take 2-3 years or more to be ready to go for proper commissioning. But building your way up, being a bit part in somebody else's tender documents or other things is an option. Not always, you can go in as a freelancer or on your own, but in our work, they'll want to see a relevant sort of legal structure that can govern and manage the commissioning opportunity that's there. And a lot of it's about reputations and making sure that you're a good strategic values and delivery fit, and you'll, some things are about value for money, some things are about them wanting to reach and diversify who it is they're working with. You've got to understand what is it they're looking for. And what we've put in here, I think they're all still current, are there are portals. Does anybody know any of these procurement portals, or is anybody looking out for commissioning or tender opportunities?
Yeah, pro contract.
Yeah.
Across the UK.
Pro contract, and that's so you'll have filled in a bit of a database, you'll fill in a pro forma, and you'll get churned out opportunities that are usually totally irrelevant, and that but you get like a little list of what's coming up that you might want to go for, and you have to really tick the boxes carefully so that you try and get a good summary of what opportunities might be, and it can be all sorts of things. The chest, government contracts, the Arts Council have one, and there's others, but we can chat more about that later for people that want to, but it's just remembering it's in there in the mix. And it's at this point in time, it's about making sure people know it's not an impossibility for them, because there's different routes into commissioning options. And as I say, do be doodling and do be thinking, what are we doing now and what could we be doing in the future, really is what this tool is for. So fundraising, oh, instead of me talking about fundraising, let's hear some of your wacky and wonderful fundraising things that people have done. Anybody done any great fundraising that might stick with any of this stuff? Anybody run any events? Anybody ever run a crowdfund?
The station has a crowdfunding page, which is
Yeah.
not great.
And it's a job in itself. You know, fundraising is a job in itself. It doesn't happen by magic. It doesn't happen if you don't have a team of people on it who are communicating, who have marketing and promotion and targets. You know, and so whether it's a crowdfund, whether it's an event, you know, it's thinking. The reason this is in here alongside funding, and when I talk about the two, you've got funding is there's criteria, there's a form, it's competitive, you'll get rejected, or you might, you know, and you've got to not take it to heart. You know, fundraising, and you could work 3 days, 3 weeks on a funding bid, and it could be lost time. Whereas going for fundraising, you're in more direct contact, you're in more direct contact with your audience, and you've got, as it says, free money, you know what I mean, but there's less strings attached with fundraising. There's always going to be criteria and a budget and a timeline and maybe a monitoring form to fill in for a funding application. With fundraising, you shape your tin, or you sell your tickets, or you do your tombola, you do your crowdfunding campaign, and your money's yours in theory, as long as you're going to spend it in line with what you told those wonderful people that backed your cause. You know, you should be okay to manage that money and spend it with what you know is needed rather than what's like written in a specific bit. So there's various options here, you know, crowdfunding, I think there might even be a slide like this. 1 or 2 points of that is, you know, on various online platforms, and it sort of ties in with e-fundraising. I sort of set them out. Crowdfunding is very specific and it's run in a certain way, and there's timeframes and there's magic rules for success really around that. Whereas e-fundraising is often it's an ongoing rolling donate here sort of page, or the odd campaign that you might put out in Facebook or wherever your audience might be, and using social media to kind of generate interest and people towards whatever that fundraising goal is. The sponsorship, CSR, and partnerships with local businesses, I might put you on the spot here, I don't know, but or Gurj likewise. When you know, Merlin Entertainment, for example, you know, did they have did they ever sponsor stuff, or did they ever get involved in fundraising things?
There was Merlin's Magic Wand, it's like a charity that was run by MSEA Land Trust. Yeah. Which obviously is to do with conservation. Yeah. So yes, so
that's worth thinking about. You sometimes think, oh, I've got to go to the lottery, I've got to go for this small grant, I've got to go for my neighbourhood thing. But actually, who knew Merlin Entertainment had a Magic Wand fund? You know, who knew the Body Shop's got a foundation? Who knew? You know, lots of these large organisations set out these spin-out charitable arms to deliver their CSR, or to invest in things that are close to their heart, in theory. And so it's, you know, they might sponsor something directly, like kids' T-shirts or an event, or put their logo on the bottom of whatever it is. Or they might have their own method of doing it, and you've just got to seek out what are the methods there, with whether it's small local businesses or large corporates. They're all up to something, or they could all be convinced of it, unless they're just heartless, in which case, you know, don't waste your time. But there's a lot more we could be doing with private businesses, local businesses, than we are as a voluntary community sector. I don't know whether there's anybody who's got any examples of having, you know, approached a local.
I could give one again.
Yeah.
Yeah, just there's a recruitment firm, like quite a large recruitment firm. My dad did some work with them, and I mean the turnover, you know, tens and tens of millions of pounds, but they hadn't ever considered what they could do in terms of corporate social responsibility beyond, you know, go out and paint a local community centre. And the guy just basically spoke. My dad was like, "Can you speak to them?" The conversation I had with them was like, the skills that are in your organisation, you've got accountants, you've got recruitment experts, etc., and you're going and painting a community centre. You've also got money. You know, have you considered the impact that you could have? And obviously, trying to sell it to an organisation that had never considered this before was sometimes quite difficult. But it was to them, the way I branded it is like, why don't you be the leading recruitment firm in the UK in terms of social value and corporate social responsibility? Why do you not want to be the best in that? And once it was sold in that sense, they won't stop pestering me for stuff to do. So they've like given recruiting advice to all the local libraries for free. free. They give them money. They actually have a funding pot as well. There's so much they want to do now. Want it to be packaged up in a way that kind of makes sense for them as a business.
The top tip is you never go to them asking for money. You go to them asking for help, and you go to the marketing department usually, or whoever you know, whoever you've got a relationship with, and you kind of spin it out from there.
But they hadn't even considered it. I suppose that's the way. Yeah.
I mean, the one thing that, because I've had quite a few conversations with fundraisers, and one of the things that hit me very much was that we, as charities, CICs, whatever, we have this mental attitude that we have to have a project that we go and get money for. Now, one of the things that came quite strongly from her was a lot of the corporates aren't necessarily that interested in, don't have to be, it doesn't have to be a project. It could just be that you're going and saying to them, we can give you PR, we can give you this social impact so that your staff feel that they're making a difference, etc. So you can just be going to them, even for your own core funds, to kind of say, you know, you could help us, and we can help you.
What's that relationship going to be based on? And sometimes it's about the value and the impact, and them looking good from a CSR. Sometimes it's about staff retention, well-being, you know, skills development. Often, and we all know, if people have worked in certain jobs, it can be very stifling doing the same thing day in, day out, or working in a particular department, or having a particular boss. You know, and the chance of escaping for a day a week or a few days a month going to be really good. That actually gives you room to grow, develops you, gives you responsibility, can be a massive boost. And often businesses can't create those opportunities like you can.
But the big thing is, it doesn't have to be a project.
No.
You don't have to try and squeeze it into specific.
It's got to tie into what they need to do.
It's just what they need.
Or if there's social causes that are core to their mission, or their mindset at the time.
Well, just quick words. Isn't there organisations where a corporate organisation can sign up to, and then?
Well, Macc is one. So I was going to say, wherever you're based, so I would start with your Macc equivalent in that area as one place to go, because we actually have a member of staff who specifically does that. New posts,
matching people up. There's also business in the community. Are another. There are national organisations. Business in the community are massive. They've been going for years, and they connect business to the community. There's loads of these sort of brokerage sort of groups in different ways.
Some you might know all about. These kind of resources, let's say. But I think for some of the businesses here, I would imagine, like myself, that's what they struggle with. You're very small, you haven't got the skill set for certain tasks. You get a lot of training, but you still haven't got the time to actually do.
We can chat about this a little bit later. Like Barclays is an example. Barclays Bank's doing this dish program that are trying. Lots of the banks have got programs where they're trying to link people together. NatWest has got this accelerator program where you get all sorts of people. Universities, are massive, as we all know, but they're massive talent pools, whether it's students, staff, researchers and others who need you as much as you need them, once you know how to find the front door and what they could actually offer and support on. There's a lot.
It's the front door though that's difficult to find.
And that's where I think if the organisation like Macc in that borough is doing their job, they should be the person to at least show you where the front door is, or speak to the person who knows what the front door is.
And on that, there's we'll share it after today, but I've worked a lot with universities and still do, and we've got an event on May the 16th, which is with MMU and the University of Manchester, and we will connect better with the universities. So you've all got an invitation to that, should you choose to. I'm nearly at time, so I'm going to wrap up quite shortly. But there's various other methods. I would say are you charging members? Is there a membership model in what you're doing? Flourish, we don't have a membership model. I don't want one, thank you very much. I don't want the admin, I don't want the barrier. But for some people, actually, if they can do that, they've got either a volunteer person or an admin worker that can manage that sort of thing. And actually, whether it's an annual membership fee or one-off fee or whatever, subs, weekly subs or something, it's money coming in that you wouldn't otherwise have had. So it's worth thinking, is it an option for you? Community shares and impact bonds are almost like a larger scale of crowdfunding side of things, and something I can talk to people about another day. But again, they're based on outcomes. Click.
I've done it.
I'm not going to go into crowdfunding because it's a workshop in itself. We have a really good podcast on this. And we've got lots of experience in running crowdfunds. We've supported lots of people to run crowdfunds. Here's just some of the options you could look at around crowdfunding. When I asked before, not many of you have ever run a crowdfund. We can talk about the highs and lows of that later, but crowdfunder, just giving and local giving are particularly targeted at the VCC sector. That will do for now, and talk about that later. We want to push it on.
Yep.
you remember.
Yeah, I'm finally getting there towards the end. Social investment, that's the big diamond in the middle. Anybody gone for any loan funding? Anybody ever had an angel investor? No, but these are things that people do in the VCC sector. So, people can and do this. They're not things that you go to in the first year or the first couple of years. And there might be something that's never appropriate. It just depends who you are, what you're doing. But there's all sorts of money out there to help you grow and scale. And if you're at a point where let's say you've got a 50 to £200,000 turnover, and there's this ambition and there's this demand, and you really need to grow, and it's like, and you've got some level of trading and product and service options, and you've got a track record, then loan or equity investment or combinations of are there, and they're an option. There's a lot going on in Manchester at the moment around this, and if you're not confident with it, organisations like us, organisations like all these investment readiness places, there are programmes in investment readiness support that you get, and GMCVO, I think that's the next slide. I won't bore you with all those. Yeah, GMCVO, who some of you will have heard of, both Manchester Central Government, you might know, they've been having a push on loan investment for some time. It's not appropriate for everybody. I normally tell people to run for the hills when people are trying to push loans on them, because they're 9 times out of 10 they aren't appropriate, but they're becoming more appropriate. The sector is becoming more resilient and more ready for it. I mean, you never got 10 to 30k loans. It was always 50 to 100 to £1 million loan. They're trying to. They've listened and they're trying to adapt and look at ways that people can get small scale loans, early stage loans, or mixes, and interest-free loans. To try and make these things sort of competitive. So if you're on that growth trajectory, it's worth thinking: is social investment an option for me? Should I be considering it? We can talk about the pros and cons of that another time, but just wanted to mention it. I think we're almost there. So coming up, we're going to talk about the funding landscape, but we've got another slide or two.
Oh yes.
All right.
2 minutes, yeah.
So this was just the recap. Yeah. So brilliant that Rory's here. We're going to talk about the funding bit in a lot more detail. I've left that bit out, but just as a recap, trading, it's sales and it's products, it's taxable, so there are considerations around this stuff. You get to choose how you spend that money. So that for all the hours that you put in, like I'm saying, you've got a better chance of a return if you're trading than you do if you're potentially writing funding bids going into the ether. Commissioning, it's meeting a commissioner's tender or brief, making sure that you align with what their outcomes are that they want to see happen. You're usually delivering a proposal. So it's a bit like funding where there's a proposal or there's a set of deliverables that you have to deliver to a budget. And that's what you will be working on. Often there's a predetermined budget, and you're within your rights to ask the commissioner, what's the ballpark budget here? Or, sometimes they just don't tell you and it's a nightmare. Sometimes you can go and ask, and you make sure you work that out. So you're realistic, you're putting a realistic proposal in. Like with funding, there's additional reporting, there's always the small print. How frequently are you going to have a meeting with these people? What paperwork are they wanting out of you? How have you got to account for all the financial side of what it is you're delivering? So there's always more to kind of consider that you don't have to do over here. So it's just weighing up what you've got time and headspace for at your point in time. Funding, we're going to look at in a moment, but it comes in all shapes and sizes, and it's useful for lots of different reasons. Well, I don't want to steal any thunder, so I'm not going too far. Fundraising, it's donations, it's cash, it's goods. It's what Tom was saying before, it's resources, it's free time, it's pro bono help. And so many organisations, whether they're starting out or whether they've been going for ages, the more free stuff, whether it's free venues, free accountancy, free, you name it, painting walls, whatever it might be, free space to store things in, it's all there for the relationship development and for the taking. It's just finding the right people. The stuff about gift aid there, but I think most of us are so you get to choose how you spend it, as I was saying. So that's a nutshell. The only slide I've got just lastly, I think, is just remembering things change as you grow. So yeah, I think I'll skip that. There's too much writing on it. I can explain that all the time. But it's just the point that things change as you grow. What things are called changes. So the commissioning example is that initially, if you're trying to get commissioned, you're doing a piece of research for somebody, or you're doing a consultation, or you're doing a pilot. That's how your foot is going into commissioning. Then as you grow, you're actually doing an actual commission. You're responding to a tender document. You're getting a repeat contract. You're going into procurement seriously. So that there's a what things get called changes over time. You know, likewise when you're trading, initially it's test trading. You're developing a pilot. You're getting your minimum viable product. But after so many years, or when this stuff's happened and you've reviewed it and you're growing, it turns into repeat sales or scaled orders, or you're going into new markets. So half the battle's language really with some of this stuff, and then I think the funding and the fundraising world you'll know a little bit more of. So I think is that this is just taking me back to a nice blank page, which hopefully some of you have been doodling as you go throughout the day, in the next week, whenever this is useful. Just sitting, and you can sit with your team or sit with whoever and just think, what are we doing in each of these boxes? And have we got a blank box? And is there a reason for that? And, we hadn't thought of this area, but talk to me or Gurj or Adam or later and think, I've heard about that maybe we could be training, but I can't think what we could be doing. Talk to people and they'll soon give you ideas for things that we hadn't thought of, where it could be a really neat and tidy way to bring some level of income or resource in that would just take some stress off or enable you to do things that you're currently putting on hold. So hopefully that's a all right whistle stop tour, and we can take questions on our panel in a little bit. If has anyone got any burning questions? Just sometimes hold things in your head. Hopefully that's helpful. Not rabbit in the headlight stuff, but and we did go pretty fast with that. But you've got your tool to take at your leisure, and I can invite Rory to come along and they can tell you more about from the side. Oh, we'll come to this on the panel, so I'm not too worried. Yeah, maybe Rory's going to come back to those. Yeah.
Yeah, lovely.
Awesome. So come on down. Squeeze through. Thanks, Rory. Yes. Come on in and I'll put you out.
I'll do your slides.
That's yours.
Thank you.
Hi. I haven't given a in-person presentation, I don't think, since before the pandemic, so please bear with me. So I've been asked to kind of come and present to you today on the funding landscape. I've tried to kind of make this session specifically for kind of social enterprises, and not all of the information I'll give to you will be necessarily relevant to your particular structure, but I'll try and cover as much as I can. So who am I? My name's Rory. I worked for nearly 4 years at the National Lottery Community Fund as a funding officer in Manchester, and then I recently joined Macc as an organisational development worker in the capacity building team. So Macc is the organisation which supports the voluntary, community and social enterprise sector in Manchester. And we are a registered charity. We aim to increase and develop the support available to the sector. And the capacity building team is a team that sits within Macc, and we are a team of organisational development workers who work under the supervision of the capacity building manager. And we basically support groups. So I'll speak a little bit more about the capacity building team and the kind of support that we can provide towards the end of the presentation. But just for kind of context, fundraising is one of the most important things that an organisation does. Without that vital revenue, we all know that organisations would not be able to run or deliver services. We don't just run on goodwill and air. During the worst of the pandemic, a lot of funding streams were redirected to basically responding to the pandemic. Some funders halted their application processes so they could kind of reprofile criteria and look at how best their future funding could kind of support organisations as we emerge from the pandemic and respond to the cost of living crisis. So during the pandemic, we saw a shift towards more flexible but shorter term crisis funding. And now we're seeing a shift towards more longer term, 1 to 3 years funding. However, it does tend to come with more conditions than it did during the pandemic. So, and we also know that the sector is being impacted by continuing local authority cuts. So it's clear that it's tough out there, and there's very fierce competition for funding. And all groups, regardless of size, will need to prepare and make plans. So this is what we often refer to as a fundraising strategy, which is basically just a plan of where and when you're going to apply for funding. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in this session.
So next slide.
Yeah, so what I'm going to talk about, I'll cover what makes an organisation ready for funding. So going through basically a handy checklist of things that you should consider before you even get started, and what to consider when writing a funding strategy. Then I'm going to explore where you can find funding, giving an introduction to Macc's membership and the funding portal. Then I'll discuss sources of funding, so that's small, medium and large grants, giving an example of funders that you could potentially approach, and also projects that they've funded in Manchester. And finally, I'll tell you a little bit about Macc's offer through the capacity building team. So, are you ready? Are you ready for funding? Before funders will either consider or thoroughly review your application, many will do due diligence to check your organisation is legitimate, spot any potential issues early on, and ensure you meet the minimum eligibility criteria. Criteria between funders really varies, but there are like a few generic things that I would recommend that you look at before going any further.
Yeah.
So, will they be getting the slides up?
Yeah, we'll show.
Okay, right. So you don't have to make notes on this, but this is kind of the checklist that we use at Macc. So the first thing is a bank account. So you'll need a bank account. That's pretty obvious. You need somewhere for the funds to go into, but that needs to be in your organisation's name, not the name of an individual. And it must require 2 unrelated signatories to sign off checks. You have to be careful with this because not all banks will offer that kind of account, so just look into it further. Then we've got governance. So you'll need a minimum of 3 unrelated people in your management committee, trustees, directors. In some cases, such as the case of the National Lottery, you only need 2, but this is unusual, so I would recommend at least 3. Something on kind of trustees. If you do have trustees, if you're a charity, it's important that these trustees are not paid. It's very unusual that it's by exception that a trustee should be paid, and if they are going to be paid, then it should be in your governing document that that's allowed. So moving on to the governing document.
As directors of KICs and social enterprises, then you can. So that's one of the main differences.
Yeah, absolutely.
You'll know which governance structure you're on. If you're on any of those, we can always chat about things later if you're just clinical.
Yeah,
that's great advice.
So the governing document should show that the applicant has charitable aims. So it might be that you're one of the organisation structures kind of listed on this slide. If you're kind of a cooperative or a community benefit society, if you're a cooperative, then you're generally not for profit. You're for profit, so you wouldn't be eligible for Macc's in-depth support service. But if you're a community benefit society, then you're charitable and therefore eligible for capacity building support.
No, can you just repeat that bit again?
Yeah, so if you're a community benefit society, then your aims are charitable and therefore you're eligible for our support at Macc. If you're a cooperative, then generally you're for profit, and therefore you wouldn't be eligible for capacity building support. However, you may find funders who are specifically for cooperatives, and they do exist, and you can find them on the funding portal, which I'll kind of go into later. Compliance with relevant governing bodies. So you'll need to ensure that you have your charity commission or your company's house registration number. You need to ensure that the information on your application matches the information held and showed online by the regulator. So that includes like names of trustees or directors, your objects, your income, that kind of thing. Be aware that if you have any late or missing annual returns, then that will probably be queried by the funder. So make sure you have a really good excuse up your
And some of them
sleeve.
can be really flexible. If you know you're going to cock up, you're better off bringing them first. And wait,
Definitely. Definitely. I think during COVID, we at the lottery, we were a lot more flexible around that. So we understood that, you know, people were off sick, people, you know. So if you do have that in your history of your annual accounts, and it's explainable, but it doesn't like exclude you from funding. It just is something that you need to prepare in advance. Annual accounts. So these should show that the income received by the organisation is from more than one source. So what I'm talking about here is just income diversification. We don't want to see, all your eggs in one basket. It should show that our assets outweigh liabilities, and should show that the level of unrestricted reserves is not excessively high, and I would also add on there excessively low, because both kind of are a bit of red flags. Safeguarding policy. So you'll need a safeguarding policy that's appropriate to your service that you deliver, and if you have any concerns about that, then you can contact Macc, and we support organisations to develop appropriate safeguarding policies. Also, as part of due diligence, some funders may also check that the work or project that's proposed is in keeping with the organisational purpose or object stated in your governing document. They may also check that your annual accounts indicate good financial management, that you have disclosed in your accounts if any staff earn over £60,000, and if so, if this is appropriate to your context. For CICs, I think there'll probably be quite a few CICs in the room, that there's a dissolution clause and an asset lock in your governing document. If you're working with vulnerable adults or children, as I mentioned before, that your safeguarding policy contains routes of reporting, disclosure procedures, signs and definitions of abuse, whistleblowing policy, if DBS checks are required, and the name and contact details of your designated safeguarding officer. This list is not exhaustive. Every funder will have different due diligence procedures, but this is a good place to start just to check that off. And if you anticipate any issues with anything that I've kind of mentioned here, it's really important that you rectify it before you apply. And if it's not something that's possible to rectify straight away, then it's sensible to kind of create an action plan on how you're going to resolve that issue over time. And basically have a reason why it can't be rectified immediately, prepared in advance, so that when the funder asks you, you have thought it through. Okay. So the 3 whats and a why exercise. This is something which is covered in more detail in our free bid writing training that we've run quite regularly at Macc. But I've just thought I'd introduce it here because it's a really good exercise to kind of get the cogs going. Start ticking along, start thinking about the kind of things that they'll ask you in an application. So basically, every funding application will ask you these 4 questions in one way or another. So if you sit down and answer these before you start applying, then it'll just really help you to put together those applications. So firstly, what is the need? How do you know there's a need? You need to be building a case. So show your kind of like service user, community and stakeholder involvement wherever you can when answering that question. So the second question is, what are you going to do about it? So this is the practical part. What do you actually plan to do? And try and be as clear, specific and realistic as possible. Thirdly, what will change as a result? So that is the real life social, economic or environmental changes that occur either directly or indirectly as a result of the project. So think about the short, medium and long-term changes that are going to be made as a result. And finally, why you? There's a lot of competition out there. So you need to have a really good case for why you're the best organisation to deliver that particular project. What makes you stand out against the others? And this could be things like special people, partners, skills, achievements, or your track record.
Next one.
Yeah, thanks. So fundraising strategy. Having a clear strategy on where your money is going to come from is obviously essential for sustainability. And funders are going to look at what your plans are, not just to keep the project going, but also growing in the future. So think about social value. Social value is just a catch-all term used to describe the difference an organizational project can make to the community they're operating within. There are many things to think about when preparing a strategy, including internal and external influences, likely income sources, fundraising methods, resources, and what budget is available. Once the strategy has been approved by your trustees or directors, progress should always be monitored so that you can identify successes or problem areas and revise the strategy where necessary. And I've just try and think about the rule of thirds. So this just means income diversification, which I've kind of already touched upon, but just don't put all your eggs in one basket. And be aware that if you are a social enterprise, then funders will assume that you will be trading in some capacity, and that grant funding will either be initially to kind of like seed funding to kind of get you started, or to kind of supplement that trading income that you already have. Okay, where to find funding? So a great place to search for funding, this is just a plug, is through Macc's funding portal. So this can be accessed via the Manchester Community Centre's website, via the membership login area, which is found at the kind of top left-hand page. So to access the funding portal, you'll need to register as a member of Macc. Membership is free. You'll also need to be based within the City of Manchester or have at least 50% of your beneficiaries coming from the City of Manchester. If you're using the funding portal for the first time, you'll need to do like a one-time registration process, which just sets your username and password. And if you'd like a live demonstration of the funding portal, we also have free training coming up on the 27th of April, which is called Funding Your Project, which I've stolen a lot of the slides here today from. But yeah, it's helpful if you're not particularly comfortable using it, then it just kind of shows you how to make best use of the portal.
Brilliant. And we'll obviously share both of those things with yourselves.
So the funding portal is a free service, and it's helped to develop the sector search for sources of funding. So we basically purchase a license which allows us to offer the use of the funding search engine to our members. The portal is a regularly updated online database of funding available in the UK, and there's also a dedicated local support section, which is useful for those wanting to know about kind of local support organisations. So I'll be the first to acknowledge that the funding portal is not the only search engine that you can find out there. They all vary in cost, is the only thing. If you do a Google search, numerous options will appear, and it's just about finding the right search engine for your organisation. These are some that you might have come across, but just look further into it. We also have a Manchester Community Central weekly bulletin, which you can sign up for. Again, it's free. It highlights funding that we have been notified about. And alongside the weekly snapshot, I strongly advise that everyone signs up to our free funding e-bulletin, which is sent out monthly and lists funding for basically all areas of interest. And it's updated by ourselves at Macc and also 10GM, so it can be relevant to our sector.
Yeah, it's just worth saying that if you aren't based in Manchester and you think this is irrelevant to you, then don't worry. Then in your borough, it's almost guaranteed there'll be an equivalent and there'll be support there. But you can just ask one through email to the event who might be able to help you in that.
Can I just say something as well that I found out recently, because I've been looking at it and never realised? Charity Excellence actually does CICs and social enterprises as well, which I hadn't actually realised. I kept thinking Charity Excellence, it's charity.
Yeah. It's actually amazing. Like, I feel like the funding and support out there for social enterprises is better now than it's ever been. So yeah, it's a really good point not to, just because something has a charity inside the name doesn't mean they only support charities. They may also support social enterprises. So in this section, I'm going to run through a few key sources of funding. So focusing on grant funding, by no means in the next few slides the only funders, and don't just go away and approach these people. This is just an example of funders that fund like kind of a wide range of projects, and each have kind of varying application processes. So one key tip to mention is make sure that you research. Might sound obvious, but read the website. Make sure that the fund that you choose is right for you. And where you can, ask the funder, seek clarification directly from the fund. Don't be afraid to pick up the phone. Generally, like, speaking as I work for a funder, we're generally pretty friendly people. We're just human beings, and we want to hear from groups. So just build those relationships with the funder directly. Make sure to read the website, I've already said that, and make sure you meet the minimum eligibility and criteria, and ensure that your work aligns with their priorities. They're going to have a lot of people contacting them, a lot of people applying, so it's better to choose ones which you know you directly fit their priorities, eligibility, and criteria. You can use 360 Grant Nav to see who else they've funded recently. That can really help you to kind of get a picture of the kind of things that they fund. This is the downside. Success rates are generally between 10 and 30% for funding programs. So you're going to have to spend some time. You're going to have to send out quite a few applications before you get positive results. So don't be disheartened. Like, keep going. Take into account any feedback that you receive from your funder, and also if you don't get any feedback, ask for it. Again, pick up the phone, email them back, be like, I want to set up a meeting, I want to learn more about why my application was rejected on this occasion, and that can really help you to build a case kind of going forward. I think that's it. Yeah. Okay, so here are just some examples of funders. We've got the Triangle Trust, so grants are available for up to £40,000 or 50% of the organisation's current annual income, whichever is lowest. So, and that's per year for 2 years. The 50% of annual income limit is basically to discourage smaller organisations making kind of like an unrealistic step change in income, which then cannot be sustained when the grant ends. So that's their kind of reasoning for that. They fund community and voluntary organisations working with carers or in the rehabilitation of offenders or ex-offenders in the UK. Then we have my old employer, National Lottery Community Fund, so the largest funder of community activity in the UK. They have two main funding programmes. You've got Awards for All, which is for any amount under £10,000 up to 1 year. And then
in the room had an award.
Oh yeah, hands up.
Awards for All, it's the 10K, which is going into the lottery, and then after a couple of those, potentially develop a relationship with the.
Yeah, so then you kind of, once you've had a few Awards for Alls, you can generally then apply for a Reaching Communities grant, which is the programme I used to work on. So that's for any amount over £10,000 up to 5 years. So that the grant size really varies. We got like £500,000 grants, over £500,000 grants. We've got £50,000 grants. It's any amount over £10,000.
We found that route from really helpful. If you failed, we could be really virtually pinpoint where you went wrong.
Yeah.
Virtually, and without biting it again for you, just look at it and think, oh yeah, and I think it ups your chances quite a bit, doesn't it? If they think
we applied to the lottery, we got rejected. And then we did exactly what you said there, pinpointed what they've said, and went back to them. They can't fund everybody clearly, but they give you the best, one of the best constructive advice. And then one of the things that you can go back to, some funders will say you can't really plan a year within 12 months doing it. Not approaching them. They're genuinely interested.
That's good to hear. It's always nice to get good feedback. So then we have Henry Smith. So it's a large grant making charity. They make grants totaling around £25 million each year. And they primarily fund things that address social inequality and economic disadvantage. We have Esme Fairbairn. So it funds across 4 main sectors. That's arts, children and young people, environment and social change. Across all their funding, they aim to unlock and enable potential, back the unorthodox and unfashionable, build collective networks and catalyse system change. We have Tudor Trust, so they make grants and provide other types of support. They particularly want to help smaller community-led organisations which work directly with people who are on the margins of society, organisations who support positive changes in people's lives and in the community. So their focus is on smaller, forward-thinking groups, which they've said led by capable and committed people on our website. Interesting. Then we have Forever Manchester. So this is a small local grant funder, and they manage a wide range of funds, and they all have kind of different criteria. So I won't kind of go into that right now, but it's all on their website. But yeah, that tends to be very small pots. Comic Relief. So they aim to bring about real and lasting change by tackling the root causes of poverty and social injustice. And to drive this change, they award grants to projects on the ground that work to give people a leg up and not a handout. We then have Children in Need. So they award grants to support disadvantaged children and young people in the UK. They fund organisations working to combat this disadvantage and to make a real difference to children and young people's lives. And then finally, we have Cloth Workers Foundation. So they aim to improve the lives of people and communities, particularly those that face disadvantage, by funding a range of capital projects. So this is a one-off grant, which is specifically for the purpose of predetermined capital items. So capital just means tangible things that can be seen and used, like buildings, fittings, fixtures, equipment, and vehicles.
Who do they fund? As in, I know you're saying it's capital, but is there any particular sector or anything they're interested in?
So again, it's the voluntary and community sector.
No, that's not what I meant. I meant, like, is it the youth? Is it the health? Is it age?
They fund a wide range of kind of thematic areas, but you can find it all in there.
I couldn't think when I said sector.
Yeah.
The
The Cloth Workers Foundation.
Is that the last one that you just
I think
mentioned?
so, yeah. That's the capital funder. Yeah.
Shall I ask a question?
Yeah.
Or we could just go on the site and look. But am I right in thinking the middle three,
Yeah.
particularly only Thompson, the Smith, the Trust and the Captain? Am I right in thinking they concentrate solely on charities?
No, I mean,
Unless it changed about 6 months ago, I think those three did just on charities.
Yeah, I think historically they have primarily funded charities, but I think as with most grant funders, they're moving towards funding a wider range of kind of structures. And when I kind of did a bit of research for this presentation, I kind of checked that they funded like CICs, and all of the ones here like fund CICs.
Oh, right, thank you.
Perhaps for like specific funding programs, but yeah. Right, so here are just some examples of projects that have been funded in Manchester. I've tried to kind of choose a variety in terms of like size of grants, but you can find kind of examples of projects that funders have funded on their websites, or you can also search through 360 Grant Nav, which is a really good tool to kind of, just find out, do a bit of research on like the kind of things that funders,
360 Grant
Nav,
Nav.
like navigation.
Okay.
So this is just a few CICs. I thought a lot of people here would be a CIC structure that have been funded. So LITD CIC, please put up your hand if you're here, because
No data to tell them supporting the right at the early stages of the MSEA to such an aggressive really.
Well, there you go. So they were awarded £10,000 from the National Lottery Community Fund, and the funding has been used to provide advice, support and mental health counselling to asylum seekers and refugees at high risk of depression due to loneliness, poverty and unemployment. and to raise awareness of the impact of immigration-related issues have on mental health and well-being. We also have across UMA CIC, they were awarded £32,000 from BBC Children in Need, and the grant was used to empower Black children and young people in Manchester to deliver social action in the community. And then we have Gadio CIC, so that was in 2021, they were awarded £750 from Macc. Thought I'd mention that we also run funding programmes for events to raise awareness and increase the reporting of hate crime amongst LGBTQ+ communities.
You've already got one of your contributing factories. Because we do a lot of work supporting women facing hardship and all sorts of other things. We're using that money to develop our online Flourishing Futures Finding Financial Security programme, where we've got over 40 different women with all sorts of complex needs going on behind the scenes, because we know that if people aren't in insecure housing or got sort of financial stability, can't create the social change they need to create what they want to create. So we've got a mixture of support and then this sort of personal finance stuff going on where everything, relationship with money, other barriers we've got to pension wills, housing, getting on the property ladder, all sorts.
No, that's a great example. That's a great example. Good. So I just thought I'd speak a little bit about the capacity building team and the kind of support offer that we have at Macc. So we provide group developmental support to build the capacity and sustainability of local voluntary, community and social enterprise organisations which benefit City of Manchester residents. So this is available through our bespoke one-to-one support and through training. So information and support is available through our dedicated telephone information service, which is open Monday to Friday 10 till 4, or you can email us. All of the contact details will be on the last slide. My team also runs weekly online drop-in sessions every Friday, which is from 11 till 12, and you can book in a 15-minute slot. And we'll just be there to listen, tell you more about what we offer and show you kind of how you can access support. These are just kind of short introductory slots. It's actually amazing how much you can get done in 15 minutes, like, honestly. But they're primarily aimed at kind of new groups or groups that are new to Macc. So you just kind of meet the team and find out more about our support and the services that we provide. We also provide a huge roster of free training, which you can browse and sign up to via our website. And we also have loads of free resources for groups. So these are just available. They're on our website. You can browse them under support for groups. And they include things like policy templates and like fact sheets on like lots of topics. And you can just kind of pick the ones that you find most useful to you.
So you don't have to be a member?
No, that's just on our website. So yeah, just use them. Eligibility for one-to-one support. So when groups contact us, we kind of ask a series of questions to kind of determine if they're eligible for our free service. And this is basically to kind of direct the capacity to those who need it the most, and also kind of within the scope of our contract and Macc support offer. So we need a minimum of 3 unrelated people on your governing body. The group must primarily benefit City of Manchester residents. You must have charitable aims. We often have a waiting list, although last week we got to the bottom of our waiting list for the first time in like 9 months. So now's a good time to come to us. So yeah, contact us if you'd like to be kind of like added to that waiting list, and we'll see if we can support you.
I'm just asking, but
Yeah.
Does that mean if you're based somewhere else, but it's
Yeah.
benefiting residents, it's all right, or do you have to be based?
Yeah, so if you're like, for example, like your office is based in Salford, but the majority of your beneficiaries are from Manchester, then that would be fine. But yeah, if you're based somewhere else, but only like 30% of your beneficiaries are based in Manchester, then you wouldn't be eligible. And that's just because Macc's remit is to support groups in the City of Manchester. But there are lots of other CVSs out there that kind of support. Yeah, that's right.
But yeah, most people know when they see it. If they don't, we can certainly help them sign up.
Yeah.
What it's about. Most boroughs, you know, there was some gaps years ago where certain boroughs didn't. Most boroughs now do have So there's probably a lot going on to help people.
Yeah. So what can we actually do if you, specifically on the topic of funding? I mean, we do a lot more than this, but specifically on the topic of funding, we can kind of help you to review your funding search results. We can work with you to kind of refine the results and identify the most suitable funders or funding programs. We can assist you in applying and reviewing funding application forms and basically like act as a critical friend to your application, so we can like read them, give you feedback. There can be a bit of back and forth, and then you can send it off. We can also help you to develop a fundraising strategy. That's something we do quite a lot. It's not as complicated as that sounds. Is that my last slide? Yeah. The last slide is just our contact details. So the telephone information service, that's the email address, and that's our website. Thanks for inviting me. And sorry for the very whistle-stop tour of the funding landscape, but we're just to let you know that Macc is here for you as a service, and that's what we do. We support groups to develop and become more sustainable. So yeah, just use us if you need us.
Thanks so much.
Before we've got about 20 minutes or so where we're just going to have a bit of argy-bargy on how not to write a funding bid, and we'll hear some of your horror stories, and we'll share some cards, and we'll just share some tips and thoughts on what to do that stuff. I'm going to hand around the sign-in sheet. I really have to sign in it. So start with the page. If you fill it in, brilliant.
Thanks so much for that.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah, we'll get lunch in about 20 minutes or so.
In Macc,
Cheryl's here, yeah. Cheryl runs training, and she's now head of the membership team.
right,
So she's
maybe why she's not in Macc as much.
yeah.
And I've been trying to get in touch, just I didn't even get the feedback from the workshop, and you know, just finding out if she was interested.
We're going to start off with
more or whatever, and I've just not had any feedback.
Email me if you want. I can chase it for you. My email's Tours with a H
That's one of the ladies who's a
.org.uk.
She works in a lot of schools.
I'll chase it for you.
So,
but yeah, she's in. I mean,
she's keen to go down.
she's really finished. She's got a new season. We lost communication, so she's running our reports. So she is really changed, but I can just do the work for her and get it if you want.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
Yeah, they do. Yeah, they do.
Are you right?
Yeah. There's a friend of ours who works with them.
Yes, of course. I need to go get the form, so everyone's going to get a chance. But I'll go and get the booking
There'll
form.
be sheets that, and what you do is you sign in and say, I want that.
So,
I want
yeah,
with
it's
Tom, I
something
want
which-
with
Yeah.
Gurj, I want with
today,
For today,
no,
yeah.
but-
Yeah. So I'll go get the form.
Interested into
What?
services like
You thought I said I wanted to listen.
courses, so I'm trying to get. I mean, I've got a friend.
On this sheet.
So
I'm very
we're
English.
going to take a lunch break shortly. We're going to kind of plough through for the next 20 minutes or so. I know that's a quick comfort break. We probably should have squeezed one of those in, but we'll let you get networking and doing all this stuff shortly. I'll just push that across. We just thought, there's a lot of information there. We just thought, let's digest it and tear it apart and, hear from you as well around, your thoughts on this stuff, where you're at with it, or, like we said, horror stories. We thought we'd frame it how not to write a funding bid. Just while people are settling back to the seats, we are going, after we've had a bit of a chat, we're going to send around a little handout here that has got some tips on how not to write a funding bid as a summary. But just to echo some of what Rory was saying there, at Flourish Together, we support people to develop their businesses, whether that's mapping out, what they need to do to apply, whether it's looking at their options. I think in the last 2 years, we've helped over, let me count them up, in the region of about 70 organisations to apply for about 1.5 million pounds worth of funding, and it's a very broad range. And we know that we've secured at least 800,000 of that with people, so we have quite a high success rate in. I've worked with national funding, local funding, and it's great that we have people with that knowledge in our infrastructure agencies. So you're not, it's not a finger in the wind type stuff with a bit of luck. It is to a point, but it's the game, and there are ways of getting through the system. one of the things that we do with people that we started in the last couple of years is helping them create so there's a bid pipeline document, we call it. So it's, if you haven't got this already, it's like an Excel spreadsheet or a table where you're logging, you know, what funds you could go for, what's come up, and a little bit of information around them, so that you've almost got like a red, amber, green system on, you know, what's not appropriate, what's kind of coming up, what are you waiting to hear back on? Because it's hard when you're on your own trying to do all this stuff. And if you've got a small team, or even if you haven't yet, or you have got volunteers and others, the minute you've got something in a place or a system you can delegate the task to, we found that creating these little tables, spreadsheets for people, gives them a tool to then track, keep on top of things, and share, reflect with us, or reflect with their own team of volunteers. And the other thing that makes bid writing easier is this bid canvas. So a lot of what Roy just said there, you know, telling you what you need, what funders want to know, which is basically this sort of list of things. This bid canvas document that we have is a way of helping people get it all in one place. And in essence, it's an awards for all application. Once you've written an awards for all, or maybe even an unlimited or certain other funds, it's a kind of bread and butter. What's the basics, and everything else you kind of build from there. You have to start thinking, oh, what was that again? What's our company number? What was this? What was the date we incorporated? If you've got it all in one place, so you or your mum or a volunteer or anybody that says, how can I help? You can say, sit down and cut and paste me some stuff. You know, if it's not there, they can't do it. So it's just a tip. But we won't worry about what to do when you get rejected. Yeah, we'll come to that. But yeah, we'll grab some seats. We won't keep you long because I know people want to eat. But before we sort of kick off with some thoughts and a bit of a chat around how not to write funding bids, I just wonder, what are your thoughts, you know, from your own experiences? So I guess that we asked before, but hands up if you've ever had written a funding bid, and if you've ever had a funding bid successful. Oh, this is good. And if you've ever had a funding bid rejected, keep your hand up. Yes, you know, it's a nightmare, isn't it? So, and hands up if you've been up past midnight writing funding bids. You see, you know, on this slide here, there's a magic ball and there's a kind of burning candle in my naff graphics, but yeah.
Well, actually, can I mention that?
Yeah.
Because it's quite important, isn't it? Because if you're burning the candle, you're not going to do a bid.
Exactly. I'll not try it funding bid.
Yeah.
Past midnight.
But you're not either, just not. And you don't get that.
Certainly don't click submit until at 9 AM. It's a chance to read it.
Well, it's difficult, isn't it? It's difficult. You're in this bubble, this zone. And for want of a better phrase, sometimes you could become desperate.
Yeah, well, yeah, absolutely. Lots of organisations, you know, that when you've not got an income generation cocktail and you're relying on these bids, all eggs in one basket, sort of type stuff. Absolutely, there's things that can kick in, but you feel it's out of your control and it can get very irritating.
I mean, I just want to add a couple of points, which I'll pick up on the financial side of things, because I know these are really, this is governance and control, this is really important. It's really important to understand in terms of values when you're applying for something, that you are actually applying for the correct value that you need. So when we do the budgeting exercise, there's a massive piece about honesty. Be honest about what it actually costs you and what you're going to need, because a lot of people will put a bid in, and actually the mentality across those enterprises where a lot of people aren't paying themselves is, oh, I won't include this, I won't include that, I won't do this, I won't do that. If you do that and you're successful, sometimes the funding still isn't enough to keep you going. And therefore, even though you've passed all the milestones and got to the end, it's still not enough. And that's quite disheartening to see. So it's really important, as you said, to take your time and prepare.
And we call it,
make
you know,
sure you don't understand
whatever you
yourself.
don't ignore full cost recovery and go bankrupt or go unpaid.
And it's a mindset
We'll look at that later.
amongst the charity social enterprise world is, you know, we're trying to do good. So, you know, unlike the private sector, we'll just do it with whatever means we can get together. And there's a guilt around that. It's asking for enough money, basically. It's seen so many times, and it's not how the world works anyway.
It's also not what the funders are expecting.
Yeah.
So also you've got to realise that people that you're dealing with, they're there to see a proper application, to see all the information in, and they're either going to be a yes or no decision. That's all I'm going to say to you, right? But it's not wrong, and we will talk about in budgeting, putting a bit of contingency in, especially with inflation, cost of living, everything else, to make sure that you are covered. Because if you're not covered, you get the money and it's still not sustainable.
And
which
it is
just
hard.
heartbreaking, isn't it?
We'll come to it later, but it is hard to build contingency into a funding because they won't fund miscellaneous stuff. They won't fund things that are guessed. But there are creative ways of building that in. So we'll grab that later. I don't know you there, Tom. You were chatting before. I'm just conscious there's people here in the room who will have quite a lot of experience of having written bids and done all sorts. And I'm just curious, has anybody got an example of, how not try to bid?
About who you are as an organisation and what you can realistically do in the bid. So we had one wanted to run a course for promoting resilience in young people. So we're going to do like online course during COVID. So we were successful in a bid with the European Social Fund, but the sheer amount of information that they wanted to get and structure of what they wanted us to deliver just didn't marry up with young people. It didn't marry up with the nature of the course. So it was like, so they went to a training day rather than like a fluid course in terms of their outcomes, which you can't always measure when you talk about well-being and general wellness. And also just the due diligence they wanted. So they want a copy of everyone's passports and their right to work and work with young people. So that age threshold as well. And the amount of stress and what we actually were able to deliver versus the aspiration just wasn't worth what we're doing. We should have gone
isn't it?
different.
Absolutely. So in that respect, there's looking at other funders that perhaps have better methods, reporting or values that align with what you're doing, or there's working with a particular commissioner or partner who knows your circumstances, who knows you can't get everybody's inside leg measurement to get on with what you're trying to do, or there's finding a corporate sponsor who goes, we really want to support young people, we want to support marginalised young people in Manchester, we want to raise aspirations, we want to help get people into diverse jobs and roles. So there's thinking, if this wasn't funded through a funding bid, who else or what else might back this that might make our lives easier as well?
It's something you've absolutely hit the nail on the head, simply because when Rory was going through the details of one of the slides, it says, the what's and the whys. It says you have to really be clear about what your mission is and what your objective is. What are you hoping to achieve? But when it comes to the bid and funding, so there are conditions sometimes in terms of what you have to do outside of it, especially if it's restricted funding. Sometimes you get the funding is restricted, you have to spend it in a particular manner, in a particular time frame, in a time period. There's also additional reporting that you have to do to that. Do you yourself, or do you know whether the venture has the capacity to do that? If you can't do it, are you going to have to pay somebody? Build that into the bid. Say, right, actually, I'm going to have to get somebody to support me on doing my monthly reporting of the metrics or whatever it might be. But the other thing that we see a lot as well, obviously we talked about income generation, and funding is important, is also funding dependency. The funding dependency, based upon the stats that Rory actually said, 10 to 30%. Look at that 10 to 30%. If you're funding dependent, you're gambling with the income side of what your model is. So it's not overly sustainable. And it sounds, not the how big of a deal at all, but it's just about saying, it's about looking at what you need to survive. The other thing that happens, and I remember Wesley Downs talking about this, and and again, you see a lot, is mission drift. You take the funding, but the funding actually means that you have to have all these other conditions and you do all these other pieces of work. Does it actually fit with what you want to do? The analogy there is someone going, I'll give you 50 grand, but you have to jump off this cliff and land over there. And you're like, is that actually what I want to do for the 50 grand? I won't take it, and you have to realize whether it's worth your time, effort, energy, whether you can meet it. And if it's actually deviating you from the course of what you're actually trying to achieve as well. And it's important to realize that it's there to support you, but you have to keep that mission objective there at the top all the time. Otherwise, you'll start to
you don't have to go.
You
don't have to go for a bid. I'm curious because I know you had your hand up when you were saying, getting rejected and stuff. From your, I guess, be interesting to hear a bit about what you do, what you might have applied for funds for, and thinking around sort of how we can support sort of tweak shit, or whether you've just gone, oh, I'm not bothering. It was key, how has it been for you when you've applied?
I found it really frustrating, especially when it came to the information where you want to, because when I started looking at opening up this business, there was basically, I didn't know where to turn or who to go to, and I blundered by making myself becoming a limited company, which was the wrong route. I didn't realise that at the time, so I had to come back, and I felt like I had to start the whole process again.
That's exhausting at the start,
and found it so frustrating, but luckily I managed to find people who knew what they were doing and could guide me a little bit. That's why I'm here today.
And what is it that you do?
I'm looking to provide counselling services for people, so by offering placements, and it was just an idea that I had, and I found it very frustrating. I didn't know who to talk to, and I think that's the main thing was it was putting me off, and I found it, I now feel like I've got a guiding route now. I know where I'm going with things, whereas before the information out there is really hard, and you find that you walk into one wall after another, and it becomes disheartening. And you write your bid, and I sent up to Unlimited because I thought I'd done everything that they asked me for. And when I got rejected, I was like devastated. I couldn't understand why I got rejected.
And they're not giving heaps of feedback at the moment. Because sometimes you can get some feedback off them. They've gotten a little better at their feedback lately, but they went through a period of certain other funders fattening down the hatches, and you couldn't get any feedback.
Well, that was one thing. I asked them for feedback, and they just didn't give me anything at all, and I felt more frustrated because I didn't know where I'd gone wrong, and I wanted to learn, and I said, if I can learn and put this bid properly in, which we've now done, I'm still waiting for that, but if I can find out where I went wrong.
And sometimes at the start it's hard, but when you've been going for a little while, there's the hedging your bets approach. So you might put a couple of bids in that are doing similar things, or that are to backfill if this work or this comes through. You're sort of juggling. If this what if, and what if it doesn't come off, you've put all that time into writing that bid, why not stick it into one or two funders to see what happens? You've got to be very careful. One of the things is, don't cut and paste because you do have to respond to people's questions appropriately and accordingly, and people can tell when you've cut and pasted and it looks, it doesn't make sense. But I think repurposing that content and doing it while you're in the zone, because it's very hard, like you were saying, if when you're in that mode, it's easy to just bang them out, so to speak, than when you're not.
And you have to realise that it's going to take a long time before you get from where you want to be to where you want to get to. It's not going to happen overnight, and I think I'm very impatient as a person. And I found that really frustrating to deal with.
To get yourself some counselling done. But what I was going to say is the beauty with what you're doing, which not everybody can do, is there are trading routes, there are commissioning routes, there's all the routes, if you know what I mean. And whilst you're waiting on bids, you're targeting those clients that can afford to pay, or those other options and things. So it's looking at the juggle.
Yeah, I think
the balance.
Thing is, for me, was asking for help. It's really hard because you really don't know what you're doing some days, and luckily, I went through Nexus Innovations Manchester, and they helped me. They put me in touch with a lady called Nicola Dickens.
Oh yeah.
So
she's the director of Flourish, and she's part of the Manchester.
So Nicola's helping me a great deal.
Oh, well, you can't go wrong now.
Yeah, so making the right footsteps now, even though it's a slow process, but I'm still getting there.
Yeah, good stuff. Oh yeah, I'll come back. Yeah.
Success rate. Is it worth, or is it not just the same project? If you put in a project, get out there to do it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, I wouldn't cut and paste. What I would say is, if you're cutting and pasting, just check what you're cutting and pasting actually answer the question. The beauty of our wonderful funding world is that every form's different. There have been conversations for the last 10 or 15 years around why can't funders streamline their questions. And if I'm honest, having worked for these things and filled in a hell of a lot of forms in the last 20 years, they have got a little bit better, and you can cut and paste a little bit more than I ever used to be able to. Yeah, very similar. Yeah. Those three what's and a why, yeah. And we have a set of those things where as long as you're answering these questions, you've pretty much got whatever you need for any stuff. And we never start with, although we did, sessions wise, the last session was all about legal structures and business planning. Normally we never start with business planning with social ventures, because it's not a pointless exercise at all, but you're better off business planning through your bid writing, because then you're writing the language in the right way, and you've got your content now rather than waiting for some business plan to evolve.
When I first came, I didn't know what to do, and I actually had now, but probably wasn't.
Yeah, you got to watch it.
In some ways, And it was a reputable local firm that did it. They ended up. But looking back, you only realise when things are not right for you with hindsight.
Yeah.
At the time, you think it's the bee's knees anyway. One of the things they did with the partner companies get me to focus on this business plan thing and really developing that, really developing cash flows and give me all these fancy templates. And I was fairly early on and I didn't know what I was doing. It turned out to be a waste of time.
Yeah,
for me,
totally.
doing it that way.
Right at the start, there's nothing wrong with there's nothing wrong with things being a little bit fag packet, because the quicker you test and fail fast sort of stuff, or iterate things, that's what I was talking before about pilot. It's a pilot, it's a test trading, it's, you know, so spending oodles amount of time on business planning and financial forecasts at that early stage, it's a total guess. And until you've done it and you've got facts and figures that actually mean something, and go to look at that, you know, you do need it all there. Exactly. Yeah, and it can really put people off. It can slow them down. You never want someone to go into something without their eyes open, without as much information as they can do. But usually, if it's just, you know, a few hundred or a few £1,000s that you've either found in kind, or that you found through a fund, or that you're giving in your time to just test something out, it's a case of like just get on with it. And that point about can you apply to other funders, you know, it can feel a bit, you know, it's very unethical to get funds and you know for exactly the same project, and, you know, back pocket the funds. Your funder will want to see your receipts, and they want to see, some of them want to see your bank statements so they can, you know, see various things. But you can apply to a fund for the same sort of thing here and here and here or wherever, and you just honest with them at the time. You say, actually, I no longer need to spend this money on this project because we've actually found resources elsewhere. Can I repurpose this? Can I use it in this way? You know, and ultimately, you make a bigger project. More often than not, these funders are giving you that little money to deliver what you wanted to do in the first place. Having a top-up pot fund or some additional elements that you can now do to make it realistic, you know, is the kind of ethical way to go about it. If you really don't need the money, you don't take it, you give it them back. But there's a good chance that most funders, if you say, you don't have to say, oh, I've actually got the full amount from this funder, because they were like, oh, you don't need our money. But you can say, you know, we've actually found resources for these budget elements. Can I actually do this instead? And as long as it fits with the proposal and the idea and the outcomes that you were going to make, or scale them up. You could do, yeah. You could do, yeah. So
it's just worth saying, so just on that, when you're saying you pay for some support, was that right? From MSEA? Okay. Yeah, no, I was gonna say. But yeah, just in case if you are accepting support from, or if you are going to pay for some support, I think we just approach ourselves as someone trusted in this area as well, just to check. I think it's something we have discussed in the past and working on is kind of approved suppliers and people in this space, but always just speak to, if you are starting out and you feel really low, if you are typing in like business planning support, whatever, I mean, it's just, the list is endless. It's so hard. So just speak to a trusted partner, someone in the alliance will have to go, yeah, we've heard of them, or maybe not. I would always recommend that to everyone because there's horror stories out there.
Go on, Maura. We're nearly there for lunch.
I guess I just wanted to know your opinion. Right, you know how I talked about this charity excellence earlier. What they've now done is they have incorporated AI into a little bunny helper, where you can, it basically helps you write, it can help you give an idea of writing a bid.
Yes.
What's your thought on that?
Well, we actually did this at our session last week. So we've, alongside these sessions, we've been running these digital skills for change maker sessions because, you know, none of us use digital technology well enough. We know what we know and a need to know. And there's all sorts of apps, tools, stuff for finance, for simplifying, for streamlining operations. So we're trying to remind people, show people what's out there. And we had Rachel Everoa show us. It wasn't that tool, but it was called, God, what was it called? I should know, but it's a similar thing where you chat GPT, and you know, one of my things is about helping people write PESTLE reports and getting the right level of policy information and statistics and research to build a case for what they're doing without having to lift a finger or do any research themselves. It's all there, just got to find it. There's oodles of it. So for chatbots, I think it's about the questions that you ask them. So
in charity excellence, they have 17 questions that they ask you, and then it will come up with some stuff. Off and kind of writes the bid, and obviously you can regenerate it and stuff like that. So it's asking you, I guess, whatever the criteria and things funders are looking for.
Yeah. It depends how it works. So the thing with that GPT thing is pulling it from Google and various sources. So it's got a very broad pool to pull information from to kind of generate stuff. And we were asking it all sorts of weird and wonderful
Well, that's
questions.
why I'm saying the charity excellence is slightly different.
Yeah, it might be, but it might be pulling it. It might. Where's it pulling its information from? Is it broad enough? Is it relevant enough? You'd soon know if you talk to it, see what it sends you. There's a few of us can look at that and go, well, that's a load of nonsense. Or how brilliant is this? We don't have to bother.
It was basically, it kind of used my wordings, but it also kind of went off, like, obviously, for instance, I was talking about their community CIC. So it went off and looked at their website and kind of said,
and pull some stuff in about, might get their mission. Yeah.
You know, it was
it can,
it was definitely internet as well, but it kind of based it on my kind of.
Yeah, I think in principle, these are actually a really good idea, because how many of us have got time to write the funny bits we'd like to write? And I think, we need to know, take them with a pinch of salt. We need to test it a few times. We need to, I know with that chatbot GBT thing, you can upload all your business plans and all, give it the best data you could possibly give it to cogitate from.
But they don't put feelings in it, and quite often.
Well, chatbot GBT is hilarious because you can choose. Has anyone used it?
Yes, I have.
You can reply like a stand-up comedian, and it was really cool.
I like it actually.
That would certainly make funders' lives a little bit more interesting. When I sit on funding panels for the national. Oh my God! And reading 50 applications back to back, it would be great to see one that sounds like it's been written by Peter Kay every once in a while. So,
well, I mean, I went on a course recently about GPT, and they were actually saying, come to us and we'll do a day course and you can write a book. It can do anything.
Oh, I know, they're really clever, these tools. So if people aren't aware that, Charity Excellence
has specifically got one for helping you.
It's like an AI bot to help you do your bid, and you just talk to it and answer some questions, and it will cogitate something for you, and you can take a view. What do I make of this? And the beauty of it is, usually you can download whatever it's done and edit it, change it, put your own stuff in that you prefer.
What I found was, it's sometimes really difficult to sit there with a blank piece of paper.
Exactly, that was the point.
And it just gave me something to
tweak and work up. Yeah, that was a point that came up this week. So, and the other one is Chatbot GPT, I think it's called. And they're free. They're free to use actually, unless you're doing certain things. And
the chat box can integrate into quite a lot of things as well. It can do blogs for you.
Exactly.
All sorts of things.
So that it's a good point, and it's worth looking at. And what I would say is, the bits that you struggle with, or the bits that you don't know, or the bits that you know, or somebody's told you you're weaker on in your thing, ask them the questions about that, because they'll go away and they'll find your pestle research. When I was looking at something brilliant, I know how this was going to save us some time. And it's just, working out what's best for you. But I think the only bit to sort of add on these chatbotty things is, it's the first time these things have come about. So however brilliant or rubbish they are right now, they're only going to get better in theory. And so if they're pretty good and they're pretty interesting right now, then let's hope they're going to get even more useful in the future.
What worries me a little bit, I suspect at the moment there's going to be less of those spiders out there looking, the funders are going to have less spiders running around them to see if they've been done by AI.
Yeah.
I guess as time goes on, maybe
there is technology, and also there is technology to notice them, and also, for example, like universities are now all paying to be able to review.
I know.
So that the technology to fight it almost is growing at the same speed as the technology to make this.
But I like the idea it gives you that.
I don't think it's no skin off of. It's no skin off of funders' nose. It's not being awarded or accredited off something. But I think ultimately, you tell the best story in your own words, or your beneficiaries do. And what you need to do is use it as a tool in the tool bag. And so if you're filling in the dull bits or the standard bits through an AI type tool, it gives you more time or more resource to really do the stakeholder engagement work with your people who aren't linked to this system, to say, what do you value about what we do? What should we be doing differently? Why is there a need for this? What working out statistics that relate to your beneficiary groups and not what that's going to be able to do. So you can balance it out with your time and stuff. Conscious, we're nearly ready for some food. I'm sure we are.
I
Yeah.
just want to, I think one of the key things we talked about again is that's funding. Because what do you do? What's your mission? Why are you here? The reason why everybody's in this room is because you've got an idea, you've promoted it, you've taken it to some distance, you had something, and it's really propelled you to do that. So I think that as much as the chatbot might do that, it's almost like asking, just takes back my uni days, my dissertation. If I had a chatbot, I think that was my roommate Dave, you copied half his notes. It's plagiarism. You've got to be really careful because someone is speaking on your behalf, and you don't want someone to do that because everybody in this room.
Well, you lose your voice then,
this
don't
is
you? And
you.
everything becomes more
And they
homogenised.
also- yeah.
What it is.
And one of those things we don't want to do the funding. Roy was also talking very clearly, they want to know who they're funding.
Yeah.
And it's about getting your voice and your passion across, which
That's
that might
really
not achieve.
important.
Yeah, and I was just going to say the thing. I'm a lot more cynical of it than maybe what you were saying, is because at some point you're going to have to tell your story to the world, and you may have already done it. You've got to tell people what you're doing, why you're doing it, and how you're going to do it, and you're going to have to do that wherever you want to do, whether it's a funding bid, whether it's commissioners. Whether you just tell your mum or your dad what you do for a job, you've got to explain that and again, it's a tool
believe
that you
it and understand where it's come from.
Exactly, and however developed AI gets, it's never going to be able to understand why you do what you do better than yourself. It doesn't matter how strong AI is. So at the end of the day, you are always going to have that information somewhere, and you will have to get that written down and then tweaking it for each funding bid. Will an AI help you with that? I'm still
Probably
really
not.
cynical about it.
No. The only bit I'm not cynical on is the saving time on certain key things or at the start.
Yeah, but even then, you're going to have that written down somewhere.
Yeah, but once you've got it written down, then you can add to it and evolve it. It's, I'm all for writing funding bids. I get paid to do it, but I think I haven't got enough hours in the day to manage the people that want my time. So even I might start going here just to see how it gets phrased and looked at, or certainly for the PESTLE stuff. If I haven't got the hours in the day to be looking at what the latest policy reports on X, Y, and Z, and an AI report can just pull them all in beautifully, I'll be like, yes. So
in a lot of ways, it means anyone can ask the chatbot to write a bid, right? That means that your bid's going to
Well,
yes,
better.
yeah. This lady here got a question, and then we'll take a break and get some food. So
Yeah, just on that, when I started writing bids, I think the first one I did was a really in-depth. I had to do PowerPoints, I had to I do music therapy, I had to video myself delivering a session and all that kind of stuff, and it got rejected.
Yeah.
And I made it like almost really clinical, like lots of research, lots of everything else. And then so the second one I did quicker, but made it a bit more personal. And I also found when I was selling my services, I go into care homes and deliver dementia flyers, and I emailed every care home in my area and got no responses. And then I spent such a long time doing this. It was really time consuming. It was really disheartening never to get back to me. And then I got in one. I went in, and once they met me in person, then people will come into the care home and see in the session. They're like, "Oh, actually, can we have you there?" And the more personal you can make it. People want you. They don't have what's on the paper. They want the person.
No, it's a really good point.
But I did like the fact that it stops that fear of the blank.
Stop the fear of the blank page and pull in better stats than you have time to find right there and then, and it might just help you start to format something if you're not used to doing that. But relying on it and not doing all the other great stuff like stakeholder work, refining you and putting your passion into it is probably where it falls down. Right, that's probably enough for now. Do you mind just flicking the slide back one? I'm not going to read this to you, don't worry. I'm just going to leave that there. There's a few thoughts on how not to. You will get a copy of that. In fact, I've got them all on my knee. So help yourself some lunch. We've got about a good 45 minutes to an hour for lunch, have we?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
When are we back?
So very important.
When are we back?
Hello. We are back at, if you could be in our seats for like 25 past 1.
That'd be awesome. So a good amount of time. There's a whole heap of food around there. There's sandwiches, there's salads, there's fruit, there is a heap of food. We're not going to starve. We're not going to starve. So do help yourselves. If that doesn't take your fancy, there are some cafes. There's one on the top floor called Back on Track, or there's a cafe on the front as well. So, and if you bought your own and you settled it, fair enough. Right, we shall pause and close that and bring Gurj on this afternoon.